Cloud Imperial Games has not been enjoying a stellar reputation for a long time. Between delays, broken promises, broken builds, a lackluster communication, disastrous live streams, and an over-reliance on ship sales, morale is at an all-time low and reputation across the gaming community is down the drain. However, one might argue that it doesn't have to remain that way. Other game developers have in the past been in similar situations, or even worse, and have successfully managed to reverse course and set their studio and games they were developing on the path to redemption. So, the question is now the following. Is Cloud Imperial Games capable of redeeming themselves, and if so, how would they do it? That is what we are going to discuss in today's video. As I mentioned in a previous video, trust in CIG has seriously eroded. In fact, it has reached such a point that an ever-growing number of backers or observers are calling it a scam, even if it technically isn't one. But even if it isn't, it still is perceived as one, and that is perhaps the most important distinction we need to keep in mind. It has been CIG's own actions that have led to the situation we're currently at. The fact that every announcement always seems to be 2 years away, missed release dates, the ships sold 13 years ago that still have not entered production, the original stretch goals that have been ignored or completely cancelled, the lore around Pyro or Nyxt, which has been retconned, also the year of playability, which saw its positive effects disappear after only a couple of patches to a point where the game was hardly playable again. The reaction towards the community, which at some point has been downright hostile, like when we were called rollback watchers, or during their last livestream where they openly laughed at us for buying store items and mocked us for always being negative. It just doesn't look good, and all of these unfortunate incidents have accumulated to a degree of defiance towards the studio where we might be very close to a point of no return. However, not all hopes are lost. Other games and studios have been able to turn similarly dire situations to a point where they are now being cited as examples of redemption stories, stories of catastrophic launches and poor practices being turned into stories of passionate dedication and fulfilling the expectations of their communities. One such example is, of course, Hello Games, developers of No Man's Sky. Launched in 2016, No Man's Sky was heavily criticized by the gaming community for failing to deliver on many of the promises that had been made prior to its release. The backlash was so intense that every gaming news media outlets covered it, and the overall gaming community was made aware of how much of a fiasco the release of the game was. Hello Games could have just walked away, tails between the legs, but instead continuously improved the game, listened to the community, and even added features that were never mentioned beforehand. It took a long time to Hello Games to rebuild trust, but today No Man's Sky is perhaps the most cited example of a game that suffered from the disaster launch and yet got redeemed thanks to the hard work and dedication of its studio. How could we not cite Cyberpunk 2077 too? When it released in 2020, the game was heavily criticized for its many bugs and performance issues, as well as the lack of some promised features. The situation reached such a low point that Sony had to remove the game from the PlayStation Store until the developers fixed their game. CD Projekt Red spent 3 years fixing the game, and it was only by 2023, 3 years later, then players started to see significant progress. That work, however, allowed Cyberpunk 2077 to change the gaming community's perception, as what was once seen one of the biggest disappointments in gaming is now seen as one of the best RPGs of the decade. One could even argue that Elite Dangerous is also undergoing a redemption arc, although I would say that it is not entirely complete at this point. Elite Dangerous released in 2014 and featured from the start the entire Milky Way galaxy to explore at a 1-to-1 scale. The game allowed players to fight, explore, or trade, and more features were gradually added to the game. Development seemed to slow down until Frontier released the Odyssey expansion in 2021, promising the long-awaited Space Legs update, along with the possibility to land on planets with a tenuous atmosphere. While some players enjoyed the update, it did receive negative feedback from the community. Among the grieves fans had were the subpar FPS combat experience, the fact that there weren't many reasons to leave ships, and a significant downgrade when it came to planet rendering. To make it short, the community was disappointed and the player base was dwindling, and Frontier had to find a way to turn things around if they didn't want to see their venerable title die out. 4 years onward, new content additions were limited to a minimum as the studio focused on narrative elements such as the Thargoid Wars while they were busy recalibrating their development model. Frontier then focused on improving existing game mechanics such as power play, squadrons, exobiology, and mining, while adding new gameplay such as player colonization, all of which were very well received by the community. The studio also adopted Star Citizen's funding model by regularly releasing new ships players can buy for real money before they are being added to in-game shops, except that here the ships do not cost several hundreds of dollars but a few $dozen at most. There is a fourth game I would like to mention, one that is also undergoing its own redemption arc, and that is Cities Skylines 2. Unlike the previous games, it is not a science fiction title, but just like the previously mentioned games, it suffered from a catastrophic release featuring major performance issues, broken promises, especially when it came to its simulation, which left a lot of people disappointed. Instead of fixing the issues, Colossal Order barely fixed the game, blamed it on the fans, saying that if they didn't like it, then the game wasn't for them, and even called the fans toxic. Colossal Order went as far as returning to work on Cities Skylines 1, releasing new DLCs and updates, while leaving Cities Skylines 2 in limbo. Luckily, they were only the developers and not the franchise owners, which is their publisher, Paradox Interactive. What happened next is that Paradox took the development of Cities Skylines away from Colossal Order and gave it to another studio, Iceflake Studio. Since then, the game has benefited from several major updates that have tremendously benefited the game. Not only that, they also listened to the community, prioritizing the most pressing concerns including simulation, but also graphics themselves. Every Cities Skylines fan would now agree that now the game is in a much better shape, and this was all because the publisher decided to handle the matter and give the development of the game to the people they deemed capable. Maybe having a publisher isn't that bad after all. So why did I pick these 4 games as example? That's because they all share characteristics that make their stories relevant to the situation Star Citizen is currently experiencing. They all suffered from major development problems, disappointed their communities, faced broken or unfulfilled expectations, all of which led to a serious backlash from their respective communities. However, these examples are also proof that redemption is possible even after years of disappointment, but only if the studios acknowledge their errors, work hard on fixing them, and produce enough results so that the community can perceive noticeable improvement, and that is exactly what CIG need to do right now if they want to benefit from a similar redemption arc. So, what should CIG actually do if they want to earn that redemption arc? First and foremost, I think they need to rebuild trust with the community, and that starts with more open and honest communication, something CIG used to give us in the past, but that has gradually stopped to the point where now it becomes the exception, which is something many people in the community are upset about. However, communication alone is not enough. CIG needs to spend more time fixing and polishing the game, even if that means keeping builds in the PTU for longer and delaying releases when they don't meet a certain standard of quality assurance. The player experience should take priority over decisions taken by the marketing department regarding ship sales or a targeted release date. But above that, I think that CIG really needs to show the community a greater level of respect, which needs to be reflected in its videos and official communications. They need to stop patronizing players or making us feel like we know nothing about what's going on. Mocking the players for purchasing items on the online store or just getting upset about the current state of the development is something that should never happen again. Also, I think it's about time Spectrum becomes a place where the community's feedback is listened to instead of being systematically suppressed. Deleted by Knight Rider-CIG shouldn't have become a meme within the Star Citizen community. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any moderation, of course, but deleting criticism should be the exception, not the norm. If CIG wants to rebuild the trust it has lost, it needs to demonstrate that it is willing to listen to its players even when they have to say things that are not flattering, and even if they share memes or negative videos. Now, to be fair, as I am finishing writing this script just following the release of Star Citizen Alpha 4.10, there seems to be some encouraging signs. It looks like we are going to have a video showing us meetings of CIG developers talking about the issues and how they plan to fix them. That is positive. That is what the community expects when it comes to open development. Also, from the patch notes we got from the release of Alpha 4.10, it looks like over 1,200 issues have been corrected, which is a very impressive numbers and shows how much work was needed to bring the game to a more playable state. Of course, there will be many more bug fixes to come. The work is far from over, but focusing more on the player experience is the way to go in order to maintain retention and ensure a better word of mouth. And while these seem to be recent signs of improvement, that's definitely not going to be enough to appease the community. CIG need to address the situation regarding the last livestream, which they still haven't done. CIG need to address the total lack of communication regarding the release of Squadron 42, which is still being listed as getting a 2026 release, and as I'm writing the script of this video, it still hasn't shown any new announcement or any trailers. CIG needs to stick to their promise of bringing back a weekly video content schedule, and CIG need to stop suppressing criticism, because whether they like it or not, they reflect the current mood of the community, and if the community has felt frustrated for a while, it's because they have reasons to, and deleting threads or banning people is not going to make that frustration disappear, it's only going to reinforce it. So, can Star Citizen be redeemed? Well, as long as CIG is around, yes, it's never too late. They can choose to prioritize community satisfaction and go back to the formula that once gave them a much more positive image. They can choose to spend more time fixing bugs and providing us with a better experience. And if in addition, they manage to release brand new groundbreaking tech that will allow them to fulfill some of their long-standing promises, I have no doubt that the community will start feeling much more positive about the game. But in the end, redemption will not come from a Jesus patch, one long-awaited ship, or one impressive new piece of technology. It will come from consistency. CIG needs to demonstrate month after month and year after year that it has learned from its mistakes and that delivering a great game is more important than simply keeping the ship sales cash machine moving. If they can manage to do that, the narrative around Star Citizen might change just as dramatically as it did for No Man's Sky or Cyberpunk 2077. That is all for this video, guys. Let me know in the comment section down below, do you think that Star Citizen can be redeemed, or do you think that it's gone, it's completely unredeemable, and there's nothing we can do about it? Let me share, please share your impressions in the comment section down below. We got a giveaway this month. Yes, it's a giveaway that I committed at the start of the month before the shitstorm. I bought this pack. It is a Shiv and a Basher all together. There will be 25 entries on the Wheel of Names for the people who subscribe to the channel and comment to any videos posted this month. Automatic entries for Patreon and YouTube members, so if you enjoy the content and you want to support the channel more, that's also one way you get rewarded. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day. As always, a big shout out to Dr. Frobin, Socrates, Sisters, Ducky to Ducker, Shadow Rise, and Zero Crusher. I've been the Eradicator. Wish you guys a great day. Cheers.